On a frozen Christmas Eve in the Arizona Territory, a wealthy rancher walked into a small bakery carrying his daughter, and walked out carrying his faith in humanity again. That night, a brave little boy asked a rich stranger for leftovers, and the answer changed everything. Watch till the end to uncover what happens next. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and if these Western tales make your day a little better, subscribe now, partner. Your support keeps them coming.
The frost was a stinging shroud across the high desert, turning the sparse scrub in the dusty roads of the Arizona Territory outpost to silver. It was Christmas Eve, and the cold was unforgiving. Pat Brennan, though accustomed to hardship, pulled the collar of his heavy broadcloth coat higher. His 4-year-old daughter Laura was asleep against his chest, her weight solid and necessary, but growing heavy even for his sturdy frame. Pat was a rancher, not just any rancher, but the owner of the Bar X, a sprawling holding that whispered of ambition and hard-won success. The meeting he'd just left, a protracted negotiation with the Territory Bank over a vital land deal, was the reason he was out in this chill when he should have been home stoking the hearth. His boots, polished before he left the ranch, were now dusted with the white of a rare thin snow, and the gold watch chain across his vest signaled a man who commanded respect. Yet the exhaustion that deepened the lines around his eyes spoke of a different kind of poverty, the unending ache of grief. Eleanor, his wife, had been gone 18 months. He was still stumbling through the task of being both mother and father, his ranch hands and housekeeper offering kind support, but the core burden was his alone. The success felt hollow, the responsibility crushing. He often caught himself standing in the ranch house kitchen at midnight, staring into the dark, wondering if he was forging the right path for Laura. The bank visit had stretched too long. The afternoon sun, weak and distant, had already vanished, leaving the world bathed in that profound, quick blue twilight of the western winter. "Pia," Laura mumbled, stirring. Her hand tightened on his coat. "Cold, Pat, and hungry." "I know, honey. Just a minute more," Pat soothed, adjusting her. He'd forgotten the pouch of dried apples he usually carried. He scanned the boardwalks, his gaze landing on a small wooden building set slightly back from the main street. Its single front window was hazy with warmth, and inside, a coal oil lamp cast a buttery, inviting glow. A simple hand-painted sign read, "The Hearthside Oven." It looked clean, respectable, and quiet. Just what he needed, quick sustenance, then a rush home. The bell above the heavy wooden door gave a sharp, lonely jangle as Pat pushed it open. The warmth that enveloped them was immediate and rich, heavy with the scent of yeast, molasses, and hot spice. It was the smell of civilization, of comfort, in a world mostly defined by sagebrush and dust. Behind the counter, a woman was arranging the last few loaves of brown bread on a shelf. She was perhaps 30. Dressed in a plain, faded calico dress beneath a flour-dusted apron. Her dark hair was braided tight, but Pat noticed the thinness of her wrists and the deep weariness etched around her mouth. She looked up, and her expression instantly shifted, a practiced mask of polite commerce replacing the anxiety. "Good evening," she said, her voice clear, but pitched low, as if to preserve its energy. "Welcome to the Hearthside. What can I get for you, sir?" Before Pat could speak, a boy emerged from the back curtain. He was small for 6 or 7, with straw-colored hair and clothes that were mended and clean but terribly threadbare. His coat was visibly too tight at the shoulders, and his little leather boots were cracked and worn smooth at the toes. But his face, clean and combed, was dominated by eyes that held a sharp, startling intelligence. "Ma, are those folks come in?" the boy whispered, looking at Pat and Laura with an intense, unwavering curiosity that made Pat instinctively pull his hat slightly lower. "Yes, James. Now go back and tend to your lesson slate, dear. We'll be closing up directly," the woman instructed gently. Her name, Pat saw on a small pin, was Sarah. James didn't retreat. He moved closer to the counter, his gaze sweeping over Laura's sturdy new coat and Pat's tailored wool. Laura, suddenly bashful, hid her face against her father's shoulder. "Laura Bug, what do you need? A ginger cookie? Or maybe one of those soft rolls?" Pat asked, tapping the glass case. Laura peeked out and pointed a mittened finger at a small ice cake slice. "That one, Pat, the bright one. A slice of the lemon cake," Sarah confirmed, her hands moving deftly to retrieve the treat. "And for you, sir, a coffee, black as night, and I'll take that honey nut twist, thank you." Pat scanned the almost empty shelves and the few remaining goods in the case. The bakery was orderly, but the lack of stock was telling. As Sarah started his order, James continued his silent assessing watch. There was no childish envy in his eyes, but something colder, more profound, a desperate kind of calculation. Pat felt a strange tightening in his gut, a familiar discomfort he couldn't name. Sarah placed the wrapped cake and the twist on the counter, then poured the coffee into a thick ceramic mug. "No to-go cups here," which she wrapped with a piece of cloth to keep warm. "That'll be 45 cents, sir," Sarah said, offering a strained smile. Pat reached for his money belt. As he pulled out a dollar bill, James spoke up, his small voice cutting the warm silence like a shard of ice. "Mister?" Pat looked down at the boy. "Yes, son?" James swallowed hard, glancing quickly at his mother, whose head had snapped up in a mixture of fear and shame. The boy's face was earnest, too serious for his years. If you don't eat all of that twist," James began, his voice small but steady. "Or if you leave any crumbs behind. Ma sometimes, she says, sometimes people don't finish things. If there's bread that's too stale for paying folk, or anything you mean to throw out. My mama hasn't had a proper meal today, and if you're tossing it anyway." He trailed off. The silence that followed felt vast, echoing the vast empty spaces outside the window. Sarah's face was the color of fresh milk, then burned a deep crimson. "James, we don't." Sarah choked on the words, pressing her hands to the back of the counter, trying to find her voice. "Sir, I apologize. He doesn't understand. He has no call to be asking customers for their discards." Pat stood still, Laura's small warm body a ballast in his arms. He looked at Sarah. He saw not a clumsy demanding beggar, but a woman brought to the brink. He noticed the threadbare elbow patches on her dress, the way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the counter, the thinness that wasn't just physical, but seemed to sink into her very spirit. Then he looked at James, brave, humiliatingly honest, asking a question a child should never have to ask. The cold knot in Pat's chest, the one put there by Eleanor's death, twisted into a strange, empathetic ache. "Actually," Pat said slowly, finding his voice, which came out firmer than he expected, "you know what? My eyes were bigger than my stomach. I ordered too much." He carefully set Laura onto the floor, holding her hand. "Laura here only needs the cake, and I'm not half as hungry for this twist as I thought. Seems a pity to haul these goods back out into the cold when you could make use of them here." Sarah's eyes, suddenly shining, were fixed on his. "Mr. Brennan, you don't have to put on a show for us. Please, just take your change." "I know," Pat interrupted gently, "but I insist. It's Christmas Eve, ma'am. No one should be hungry tonight, least of all a good woman who works this hard." He glanced at the meager supply. "And what happens to all this when you close up shop? Looks like you have half a day's worth of baking left." "I take what I can to the mission house," Sarah said quietly, looking down. "The rest, we keep what we can use, and pray the mice don't get at the flour." Pat made his decision. It was a clear, sudden shift, the way a dark cloud suddenly breaks to let the sun through. It felt like the first easy choice he'd made since Eleanor died. "I'd like to buy it all," he said. Sarah's head snapped up. "Sir, what did you say?" "Everything in the cases, all the loaves, the pies, the rolls, the cookies," Pat confirmed, pulling his money belt out fully. "I'm purchasing your remaining inventory. But that's well over $40 worth of goods, Mr. Brennan. I couldn't possibly." "That's fine. I have the coin." He laid out several double eagles on the counter, and he added, looking at the coal oil lamp, I'd like to close the shop for you. Now, it's Christmas Eve. You need to be home with your son." Tears streamed silently down Sarah's face, tracing clean paths through the faint flour dust on her cheeks. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this? I'm a stranger. We're nothing to you." "Your son asked me a question," Pat answered simply, and it was the bravest, most honest piece of straight talk I've heard in a long time. "Because it's Christmas Eve, and people need to remember what matters. Because I can help. And that's the reason." He paused, his gaze softening as he recalled the raw, sharp edge of his own grief. "And because my wife Eleanor passed last year, and I know what it's like to feel like the ground has given out beneath your feet. To feel you're failing the one person you care about most. To be too proud to ask for help, and yet so desperate you're counting every penny just to keep the stove lit." Sarah covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. James, sensing his mother's distress, moved swiftly to her side and wrapped his small arms around her waist. It was the doctoring gesture of a child far too experienced with his mother's pain. Pat had to look away for a moment, the sight cutting him deeply. Laura tugged his hand. "Pa, is the lady sad?" "Yes, honey," Pat murmured. "But sometimes, when a great weight lifts, folks cry from relief too. Is she happy now?" Pat looked back at Sarah, who was burying her face in James's hair. "I think she's starting to be." It took a little while to pack everything. Pat insisted on paying the full asking price, plus a generous stack of silver dollars, he insisted. Sarah keep as a freight handling fee, which she initially refused until he told her gently that rejecting kindness was a stubbornness that served no one. As they worked, packing the bread and sweets into boxes and simple cloth sacks, Sarah told him her story. She'd opened the bakery with what little inheritance she had, believing a good, honest trade was the way to raise her boy. But the prices of flour and coal had soared, the winter trade was thin, and a sudden sharp downturn in the nearby mining camp had dried up her customers. "I'm 3 months behind on the lease for this shop, Mr. Brennan," she confessed, tears still close. 2 months behind on the cabin. I was hoping the holiday sales would pull me through, but I'm just fooling myself. James and I will manage. We always do, but it's hard to keep faith when the evidence keeps turning against you." "And you?" Pat asked, his voice low and pointed. "When was the last time you ate a full meal?" Sarah just shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "That's what I thought," Pat said, taking out his personal ledger book. "What's the name of the man who holds the lease on this shop?" "Mr. Silas Crow," she answered, confused. "But why are you asking?" "Just checking something." Pat stepped away and spoke a few quick words to a man he knew passing by on the street, scribbling a note and handing over a sealed envelope of money. When he returned, his expression was sober. "How much is your monthly lease here?" he asked. $60, Sarah replied. "Which is a bargain, but it might as well be 60,000 right now." "And how much would it take to cover your back payments, get you a full fresh supply of ingredients, and buy you enough time, say, 6 months to weather this rough patch?" Sarah looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time, the wealthy rancher, the man of business, a force that could easily crush or raise her. She calculated painfully. 400 silver dollars, Mr. Brennan. That would cover the debt, buy proper winter stores, and give me a breath. But I can't. I won't ask you." "You didn't ask," Pat said firmly. "I am offering. Think of it as accepting. Think of it as letting someone help who has the means and the desire to do so without hardship." He paused, his eyes drifting to a small locket Sarah wore. "Think of it as simply passing it on." "What do you mean, passing it on?" Pat looked at Laura, who was now sitting with James, sharing the last piece of the lemon cake and drawing pictures in the flour on the counter. "When Eleanor died," Pat whispered, "I was adrift. I had everything. Money, land, cattle, but I couldn't function. I couldn't care for Laura properly. I was drowning in the loss, my foreman's wife, a quiet old woman named Mrs. Higgins, didn't say a word to me. She just started leaving things. Meals on the porch, clean clothes laid out for Laura, a fresh kindling box every morning. He smiled, a sad, distant smile. I tried to pay her. She wouldn't take a dime. Finally, I demanded to know why she was doing it. And she said, "Pat, years ago, when the winter fever took my son, someone paid my way. I never knew who paid the doctor, or who left a sack of flour on my doorstep, but someone did, and I survived, and now I help when I can, because that's the way of the frontier. We catch each other when we fall." Pat met Sarah's tear-filled gaze. "So let me catch you. Let someone help. Don't let your pride keep you freezing in the snow." Sarah finally broke. She lifted James high into her arms, holding him tight, and simply nodded, the tears now flowing freely, not just of sadness, but of surrender and profound relief. They finished packing the inventory. Pat arranged for a young man with a buckboard to take the goods to the mission house immediately. He then made a second, more private arrangement with his own clerk, ensuring the $400 would be transferred to Sarah's account discreetly and irrevocably by morning. As Pat gathered his hat and coat, James approached him, holding out the half-eaten cake slice. "Mr. Brennan," the boy said, his voice husky, "thank you for helping my ma. She works so hard. She tries not to fret where I can see, but I always know." Pat knelt down to the boy's level. "You are a good son, James. Noticing when your mother is in need, and having the courage to speak up, that takes real backbone. Ma says courage is being scared, but doing the thing anyway," James recited. "Your mother is a very wise woman." Pat pulled out his leather-bound card case and handed James a finely engraved card. "You keep this. When you are older, when you need advice, or perhaps you're looking for honest work, or just want to talk about how to run a business, you call on me. Deal?" James took the card, holding it like a valuable coin. "Deal." Pat stood, nodding to Sarah. "I'll see you and James in the new year. Go home. Be warm. Be fed." As Pat and Laura stepped out, the bell jingled, and the darkness and the cold rushed back, but it felt different now. Pat hoisted Laura onto his shoulders. "Pat," Laura chirped, delighted by the height. "Is that what Christmas means?" Pat watched the lamp inside the hearthside oven click off. The small window was now dark, the light of hope extinguished for the night, but burning bright inside the walls. "Christmas means many things, Laura Bug," Pat said, his voice suddenly full. "But yes, I think making someone's burden a little lighter, that's the biggest part of it." They walked home through the quiet streets, and Pat felt lighter than he had in months. The money was nothing. The act of seeing, truly seeing, another person's struggle and choosing to engage with it, that was everything. Later, sitting alone by the fire after Laura was asleep, Pat received a message carried by a young rider, a brief note from Sarah. "We are home. We are warm." James ate 2 bowls of stew. "I am crying again. They are happy tears, Thomas. You have given us more than coin. You have given us back our hope. I promise you, I will pay this forward. I will be the person who helps others the way you helped us." Pat smiled, looking up at the portrait of Eleanor hanging above the mantel. "I'm trying, Ellie," he thought. "I'm trying to be the man you believed I was, trying to see people. Really see them. The way you always did." He closed his eyes and thought of James's small, brave question. Ma hasn't had a proper meal today, and how that simple plea had opened a door to meaning, to connection, and to the one thing he had lacked since Eleanor's passing, the certainty that his wealth could still serve a purpose greater than his own comfort. The frost continued to settle on the Arizona desert, silencing the world, but in 2 simple dwellings separated by the cold, a father and a mother, a daughter and a son, slept with full stomachs and full hearts. Because Pat had chosen to see, because James had been brave enough to ask, one moment of kindness at a time. That was the law of the frontier. That was the true currency of the season.
If you really like our Western stories and want us to continue writing, consider subscribing. It really helps us more than you think.